My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 29 years old, and I've spent the last 8 years capturing moments that tell stories people are afraid to speak out loud. 48 hours after my husband threw me out of our apartment while I was 16 weeks pregnant. I sat in a hospital waiting room holding my father's old Canon AE1 and watched a genetic counselor dial my husband's number from a phone with my medical chart open in front of her. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I know because I was holding my camera up, framing the moment through the viewfinder, my finger on the shutter not to take the shot, but to steady my hands the way my father taught me. When the counselor said the words spontaneous genetic mutation, my husband's voice came through the speakerphone so loud that the nurse at the intake desk looked up from her computer. What does that mean? Claire said I thought. Dr. Patricia Reeves, 48 years old, chief of maternal fetal medicine, cut him off with a kind of precision I'd seen her use in the NICU photo series I'd shot 3 years earlier, back when this hospital had hired me to document their neonatal unit, back when my name still meant something in medical photography, back when my husband still looked at me like I was someone worth believing. Mr. Donovan, she said, voice flat as an exposure reading. It means your wife's pregnancy shows a chromosomal variation that occurs in fewer than 1 in 10,000 cases. It means the baby's blood type O negative is medically incompatible with an affair. It means you accused a woman carrying your genetically confirmed child of infidelity based on a timeline you didn't bother to verify. And it means I have her. Signed consent to tell you that you're about to become a father to a daughter with a condition you could have learned about 48 hours ago if you'd been in this room instead of changing the locks. I heard him breathing through the speaker. Then silence. Then the click of a call ending. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent those 48 hours not crying in a hotel room, but printing every photograph I'd taken in the last 8 years. Every frame, every assignment, every gallery piece, laying them out on a hotel bed like evidence in a case. I was building against my own erasure. Welcome back to Revenge Camera Stories, where the lens captures what people try to hide. And some truths take exactly 48 hours to develop, but once they do, they never fade. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe, because this one's about the difference between what people see and what the camera knows. Let me back up 48 hours, because the call came after the door slammed. It was a Tuesday night in March. I'd just gotten back from a maternity shoot in Brooklyn, some sex couple expecting twins. The kind of assignment I loved because nobody assumed anything about whose body did what or whose love counted more. I was carrying my camera bag and a folder of ultrasound images from my 16-week appointment that morning. My husband, Daniel Donovan, was sitting at our kitchen table in our Astoria apartment with his phone face up between us and a look on his face I'd never seen before. Not anger, certainty. Sit down, Claire. I set my bag down carefully. Muscle memory from years of protecting expensive equipment. What's wrong? I need you to be honest with me. His voice was controlled, rehearsed. Whose baby is it? The question landed like a bad light meter reading so wrong. I didn't immediately understand what I was seeing. What? I did the math, Claire. We had sex exactly twice in January. Once on the 7th, once on the 19th. Your doctor said today you're 16 weeks. That puts conception around December 20th, 2 weeks before we even. Daniel, that's not how. I know how pregnancy math works. He pushed his phone across the table. A screenshot of a pregnancy calculator website. Dates highlighted. I'm not stupid. I looked at the screen, then at him, then at the ultrasound folder in my hand with the date. Clearly printed. 16 weeks, 3 days. Estimated conception, December 18th to 22nd. The doctor explained this at the appointment. You weren't there, but I texted you. Conception date is an estimate based on when you got pregnant, which wasn't with me. My hand found the strap of my camera bag. The familiar weight. The thing I always reached for when the world stopped making sense. Daniel, I haven't been with anyone else. Not once, not ever. He stood up. 6'2", the man I'd married 4 years ago. Looking at me like I was a stranger holding stolen property. I wanted to believe you. I've been trying for 3 days to make the numbers work. They don't work, Claire. Then the numbers are wrong. Or you are. The kitchen went quiet. Outside, someone's car alarm started beeping. Inside, my husband crossed his arms and delivered his verdict. I need you to leave. Leave? Tonight, now. I'll send your things to wherever you end up. But I can't look at you right now. And I'm not raising another man's kid. I felt my hand tighten on the camera strap. Daniel, please. Call the doctor. Call Dr. Reeves, she explained. I'm not calling your doctor. So you can get her to cover for. You cover for, I stopped. Took a breath. Tried one more time. Let me show you the ultrasound. Let me show you the paperwork. The conception window. Get out, Claire. His voice didn't rise. That was the worst part. No yelling. No emotion. Just the flat, final tone of a door closing. I looked at him. At the man I'd photographed on our wedding day. Mid-laugh, champagne glass tilted. Sun coming through the barn windows of the venue upstate. I'd caught him in a moment of pure, unguarded joy. And I'd fallen in love with that frame all over again every time I saw it. That man was gone. Okay, I said quietly. I'll go. I picked up my camera bag. Left the ultrasound folder on the table. Walked to the bedroom and packed one suitcase clothes. Toiletries, the hard drive with my portfolio, and my father's Canon AE1, the camera he'd used to shoot my entire childhood and left to me when he died 3 years ago. When I came back out, Daniel was still at the table, staring at his phone. Where are you going? He asked without looking up. I don't know yet. Text me when you figure it out. For the lawyer. I stopped at the door. Hand on the knob. There's not going to be another man's name on the birth certificate. Daniel. Just yours. Because this baby is yours. Then prove it. I left. Here's what you need to know about me before the next 48 hours make sense. I grew up in Syracuse, New York. The daughter of a newspaper photographer and a labor and delivery nurse. My father, Tom Donovan, shot local news for the Post-Standard City Council meetings. High school football, house fires. The kind of unglamorous. Daily work that builds a town's visual. History one frame at a time. He taught me to see the way most fathers teach their daughters to ride a bike. Patiently, consistently, until it became instinct. Photography, he used to say while we were in his makeshift darkroom in the basement, is about patience. You can't rush the chemistry. The image comes when it's ready, not when you want it to. My mother, Linda, brought me to the hospital where she worked when I was 12. Let me shadow her during a quiet shift. I watched 3 births that night. Saw her hands steady and sure. And understood for the first time that some moments are so big they remake a person in real time. I started photographing births in college. Got hired by a doula collective to document home births. Then hospital births. Then NICU stories, the tiniest humans fighting the hardest battles. By the time I was 25, I'd been published in the New York Times, National Geographic, and Time, my series on premature twins surviving a 24-week delivery won a regional. Emmy for the documentary short it inspired. Hospitals started hiring me. Not for PR shots, but for real documentation. The moments that mattered. The hands. The first breath. The exhausted joy. That's how I ended up at Brooklyn Methodist 3 years ago. Shooting their NICU renovation and meeting Dr. Patricia Reeves, the chief of maternal fetal medicine, who would later sit across from my husband with my medical chart and a speakerphone. I met Daniel at a gallery opening in Chelsea. I was showing a series on midwives in underserved communities. He was there with his college roommate, worked in finance, didn't know anything about photography, but asked good questions about access and trust. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony. My mother walked me down the aisle because my father had died. 6 months earlier sudden. A stroke at 58. Gone before I could get to Syracuse. Daniel held me through that grief. He was steady, practical, the kind of man who made lists and solved problems and never once made me feel like my work was less important than his. Until 16 weeks into a pregnancy he decided couldn't be his. What he didn't know, what he'd stopped asking about years ago, was that my career hadn't just continued after we got married. It had grown. I'd been commissioned by 3 major hospitals in the last 2 years. I'd spoken at a medical photography conference in Boston. I'd been asked to shoot a documentary series on maternal mortality for a nonprofit that was funding it at $60,000 for a year of work. I'd said yes to that project 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. Signed the contract. Deposited the first check. I hadn't told Daniel yet because the timing felt complicated. Because he'd been weird about money lately. Because I'd wanted to wait until the first trimester was over. Now I was 16 weeks pregnant. Sitting in a hotel room in Long Island City with a hard drive full of work he'd never seen and a bank account he didn't know existed. And my husband thought I'd cheated on him because he didn't understand how conception windows work. The smell of photo developer that sharp chemical scent that used to fill my father's basement filled my memory as I sat on that hotel bed and opened my laptop. I pulled up every medical document from my pregnancy, downloaded them, printed them at the hotel's business center. Then I called Dr. Reeves's office. I got her voicemail. Left a message that was calmer than I felt. Dr. Reeves, this is Claire Donovan. I had an appointment with you yesterday. I need to talk to you about something urgent. It's about my husband and a misunderstanding about conception dates. Can you call me back? She called 40 minutes later. Claire, I got your message. Are you safe? Interesting first question. Yes, I'm at a hotel. My husband asked me to leave because of the dates. He doesn't believe the baby is his. A pause. I could hear keyboard typing. She was pulling up my chart. Claire, did you explain to him that conception dating is an estimate and that the window can shift based on ovulation timing, implantation delay, and individual cycle variation? I tried. He'd already done the math on a website calculator. He thinks I'm lying, more typing. Then, Claire, I'm looking at your chart. You want to know something interesting. What? Your blood work from last week showed something we don't usually see this early. A genetic marker. We were going to call you in for additional testing, but it's benign. Just a chromosomal variation that affects about 1 in 10,000 pregnancies. It's actually useful here. Useful how? Because it creates a very specific blood antigen pattern. Your baby's blood type is going to be O negative. You're a positive. Your husband is let me check the family history form you filled out B positive. Okay, so here's the thing about blood type inheritance. For your baby to be O negative with you as a positive and your husband as B positive, the genetic math actually works perfectly. But if you'd had an affair with someone who was, say, O positive or A positive, the blood type couldn't come out this way. The chromosomal marker we found confirms paternity within a 98% certainty, range even before genetic testing. I sat very still. You're saying the blood work proves it's Daniel's? I'm saying the blood work proves it's genetically consistent with you and your husband. And the chromosomal variation is spontaneous, not inherited, which means it happened at conception. We can timestamp it, essentially. And that timestamp matches the conception window I gave you at your appointment. Can you tell him that? Not without your written consent, HIPAA, but if you give me permission. I can call him and explain the medical facts. I thought about Daniel's face, the certainty, the math he'd done on a calculator that didn't account for biology. Do it, I said. Call him. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll send the consent form to your email. Sign it and send it back. Then I'll make the call. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the hotel. Business center signing a release form that would allow Dr. Reeves to discuss my medical records with my husband. I sent it back. She called me 10 minutes later. I've got him on the line in 30 minutes. Do you want to be there? I can have the conversation on speaker, with a nurse present for documentation purposes. That's standard for these situations. Do it. I gave her his cell number. Then I sat in that hotel room and waited. 48 hours after he'd kicked me out, I got a text from Dr. Reeves. Call completed. Your husband has been informed of the medical facts. I recommended genetic counseling and asked him to contact you directly. PR. I waited. No call, no text. So I did what I always do when words fail. I picked up my camera. Here's what I did in those 48 hours while Daniel was learning that chromosomes don't lie. I printed every significant photograph I'd ever taken. Not digitally, physically. I went to a lab in Manhattan that does archival printing and I paid $1,800 to print 83 images. Births NICU incubators. Mother's hands. Newborns on father's chests. The visual diary of 8 years of work. I laid them out on the hotel bed in chronological order. Then I added the new ones. The ultrasound images. The printout of my blood work. The signed consent form. The email from Dr. Reeves summarizing the genetic findings. I photographed the whole thing. Not for Instagram. Not for evidence. Just for me. So I could see the full picture. The truth doesn't shout. It just waits, patient as a darkroom, for the chemistry to finish. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on the second night. Daniel. I let it ring. Sent it to voicemail. He called again at 11:52. Again at 12:03. At 12:15, a text. Claire, please pick up. I talked to your doctor. I need to explain. I typed back. You had 48 hours to verify the facts before you kicked me out. I'm tired. I'll call you tomorrow. I didn't call him tomorrow. Instead, I called a lawyer. A family law attorney a photographer friend had used during her own divorce. I didn't want a divorce. Not yet. But I needed someone to tell me what my rights were if Daniel tried to claim later that the baby wasn't his. The lawyer's name was Sharon Eng, 52. Sharp as a tack, glasses on a chain. Office in Midtown. Did he put anything in writing? She asked. He texted me to text him my location for the lawyer. Forward that to me. That's documentation of his accusation. If he tries to contest paternity later, that's evidence of his initial doubt, which a judge will not look kindly on given the medical proof. I don't want to fight him. I want him to trust me. Sharon looked at me over her glasses. Claire, trust is earned by behavior, not apologies. He kicked you out while pregnant based on a Google search. That's not a man who trusts you. That's a man who trusted his fear more than your word. You don't owe him forgiveness just because a doctor corrected his math. I sat with that. What should I do? Document everything. Keep the medical records. Keep the texts. Keep the timeline. And decide whether you want to co-parent with this man or reconcile with him. Because those are two very different things. I left her office with a retainer agreement signed and $3,000 on my credit card. Then I did something else. I called the nonprofit that had hired me for the maternal mortality project, told them I was still available, still committed, and asked if I could start earlier than planned. They said yes. I started shooting the next week. Daniel showed up at the hotel on day 3. I don't know how he found me. Maybe he called around. Maybe he tracked my credit card. Maybe he just got lucky. I opened the door because he was standing there with flowers. And I've always been too soft about flowers. Claire. Hi. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Let him see the hotel room. The suitcase. The printed photographs spread across the bed. The camera on the nightstand. He looked at it all. Took it in. I'm sorry. Okay. I talked to Dr. Reeves. She explained everything. The chromosomal thing. The blood type. The conception window. I didn't know. I didn't understand. You didn't ask. He stopped. What? You didn't ask, Daniel. You did math on a website and decided I was lying. You didn't call the doctor. You didn't ask me to go through the paperwork with you. You didn't trust me for even one day. I was scared. Of what? Of raising another man's kid. Of being made a fool. I looked at him. At the man I'd married. And I saw something I'd been too close to see before. He'd never actually asked me about my work. Not in years. He knew I was a photographer. He knew I did hospital work. But he didn't know about the awards, the commissions, the nonprofit project, the $60,000 contract. He didn't know because he'd never asked. Daniel, when's the last time you asked me about my work? He blinked. What does that have to do with? When? I don't know. I ask you all the time. No, you ask if I had a good shoot. You don't ask what I'm shooting. You don't ask who hired me. You don't ask what I'm making. You don't ask to see the images. You never show me. Because you never ask to see them. Silence. He sat down on the edge of the bed. Looked at the photographs. Picked one up. An ICU image. Twin girls. Premature. Holding hands through the isolette walls. You took this 3 years ago. It won an Emmy. He set it down carefully. I didn't know. I know you didn't. Claire, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do better. We can go to counseling. I'll prove to you I can. Daniel, I sat down next to him. Not close. Just on the same surface. I don't know if I want to fix this. His head snapped up. What? You kicked me out. While I was pregnant. Because you didn't believe me. And now you're sorry because a doctor told you the math works. But you're not sorry because you hurt me. You're sorry because you were wrong. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You didn't trust me. And trust isn't something you get back just by apologizing. So what are you saying? You want a divorce? I'm saying I need time. I'm saying I don't know yet. I'm saying you need to prove you can trust me. And I need to figure out if I can trust you. He stood up. This is because of the pregnancy hormones, right? You're not thinking clearly. I stood up too. Picked up my camera. Held it between us like a shield. Get out. Claire, you just did it again. I told you how I feel, and you told me I'm not thinking clearly. Get out of my hotel room. He left. I locked the door behind him, sat down on the bed, and cried for the first time in 72 hours. Not because I was sad, because I was finally, clearly, devastatingly certain That was 6 months ago. Here's what happened after. I didn't go back to the apartment. I found a one-bedroom in Greenpoint with good light and enough space